Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, and I believe that the right book at the right time can change lives, and that all readers should read children's literature, especially adults. So that's what we do here on the KidLit Love podcast. We celebrate all things children's literature: picture books, early readers, middle grade, and young adult novels for readers of all ages. In each episode, we'll talk with children's literature authors and discuss their books, their hopes, their dreams for readers, their writing process, and much, much more. Whether you're an adult reading to their inner child or connecting the young readers in your life with fantastic books, you've come to the right place. So grab a notebook to build your TBR, and let's get to today's episode of KidLit Love. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the KidLit Love podcast. I'm Stephanie Affinito, your KidLit loving host, inviting you back to another bookish conversation with a children's literature author. Today, I'm talking with Aida Salazar. Aida is an award-winning author and arts activist whose writing for adults and children explore issues of identity and social justice. She's the author of multiple middle grade novels, including Ultraviolet, The Moon Within, and The Land of Cranes. She's here today to talk about her newest release titled Stream. In this verse novel, two teens are sent to Mexico for the summer to unplug and reconnect to the natural world, something I'd argue that all of us need to do. It's given me a lot to think about, and I can't wait to talk about it with her, so we are going to jump right to the episode. Aida, welcome to KidLit Love. I'm so glad you're here today.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be here, Stephanie. Thank you.
I can't wait to talk about this book. Your book Stream, I'm looking at it. Listeners can't see, but I'm looking at the beautiful cover. It's expansive, it's lyrical, it feels just like I was so connected to the characters, to both of them, to the connections between them. I can't wait to talk about it with you, but I do want to start with what I always start with on the podcast, which is getting a little bit of the inside scoop on you. So I'd love if
Okay.
you would tell listeners a bit about you and the journey that you've taken through children's literature to the book that we're about to talk about today.
Whoa. Well, do you have an hour? No,
I
just
know.
kidding.
You can pick and choose what you'd like to share.
No, absolutely. Yeah, so I always go back to this moment in fifth grade when I was given a novel to read for the first time by my fifth grade teacher, Mr. Clark. And I fell in love with books and fell in love with story. And I read so many books and I excelled so much in his classroom that he actually gave me a graduation gift upon graduating fifth grade to go to middle school. He gave me two things. He gave me a Parker pen. And this, I'm kind of dating myself here, but back then it was really high technology, special pen that came in a box and it was like weighted. And so he gave me that pen and he gave me a book of poems and illustrations called Where the Sidewalk Ends by Shel Silverstein. And that was the first book I would ever own, and I still own it. The Parker pen I've since lost, but I began to write using that pen and imitating Shel Silverstein and trying to make up stories. And I used that pen till I got to graduate. No, to I graduated high school and I got to um, college. And at 18, I saw for the first time Latino literature, and and all of a sudden, this idea of becoming a writer, which I think is what Mr. Clark was encouraging me to do in fifth grade,
Yeah.
because I'm just imagining that that's what he saw in me, but it became real, and so that's when the idea to become a writer began. But I was writing. I went to graduate school at Cal Arts after undergrad at UC Santa Barbara, and when I got to graduate school, it was really kind of when I was clear that I wanted to make this a profession. But that was in 1999. And fast forward, 20 years, and my first book was published.
Wow.
Um, it took a really long time. It took a lot of dedication, a lot of failing, and also giving up on myself. Unfortunately, I spent like 10 years not believing I was a writer. And so, but it was really my children and seeing the lack of representation, um, stories that really kind of where they could see themselves. Um, that was what drew me to children's literature.
Yeah.
And here I am, and my first book, The Moon Within, was published in 2019, and it's once the door was open, I was like, let me
That's
in.
right. The
I had
floodgates open.
Yeah, and really, I mean, in retrospect, I think that like 20 years of living really collected enough story, enough experience, and enough longing to tell story, in me that and now I can't stop.
Yeah. Oh, I love that story. Now, what I know about the audience here on KidLit Love is that we have a beautiful mix of educators, of librarians, of people who want to write KidLit, and people who just love KidLit. And your origin story that you just told, I think, appeals to all of us in so many ways. The educator in me was just, you know, so happy thinking about that fifth grade teacher and that physical gift, but also that gift of confidence and encouragement. I know the educator and probably the librarian is saying, go Shell for the mentor writers and let's emulate and build our own craft. And then what you just said about that life experience for pretty much every author that has been on here, it's not an overnight success. It is years and years and years in the making. And that idea of having the confidence of staying with it. And I think the lesson that I just took from you and my own kind of trajectory of where I am is no time is ever wasted, right? You may have spent 10 years not believing in yourself, which is a shame because oh my goodness, your words are beautiful, but it ultimately got you to this point where now it's like hats off, let's go, keep going. So I feel like no matter who was just listening was like, "Oh, that's me. Oh, that's me. Oh, that's me." And we really can connect with that. That's such it's a beautiful origin story. I loved
Oh,
it.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. There was a lot of tears and a lot of moments of um of waiting and not understanding, why I was
Yeah.
so far away from my art. But coming back feels really good. So thank you. I appreciate that. And hello, librarians and teachers and fellow writers.
So 2019 to 2026, there's been a lot of writing.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of
Yeah.
writing, a few books in there. Which brings me to the book we're talking about today. Now, Stream is technically a standalone book, but it does feature two characters from your previous novels. So I'd love for you to start by just giving listeners a bit of an introduction to the book, and perhaps the inspiration behind it and the connections that are now made in this novel.
Mm-hmm. So The Moon Within was my first book, and this book was about a girl coming of age. She's going through puberty, and her best friend and she get into all sorts of drama. And so that book was a standalone novel. I never intended to create any kind of, connecting novel, but that's what happened because it turns out that book, because it was about topics that aren't really talked about in middle grade as much,
Mhm.
um, my son and his friend asked me, when are you going to write The Sun Within? But like, that's so personal. That's for girls. So let's, um, can you do something for boys? And eventually Ultraviolet was written, and that character is also going through puberty, but from a boy's perspective, which is entirely a different universe. And
Right.
so they were kind of these loosely connected novels thematically. But in both novels, one of the things that I sort of touched on was this use of technology and the tension between using technology and the kinds of things that can happen when one uses technology, like texting, um, sending photos without consent, that sort of thing. And but they were small kind of seeds. And my editor, Tracy Mack at Scholastic, asked me, I really love this character, Elio from Ultraviolet. I would love for you to spend more time with him. Would you consider maybe even, thinking about technology around this character? Because I did, kind of touch upon it. And because at the same time, my own children were teens and really
Yeah.
having to negotiate so much of technology, and some of their friends were getting into dangerous situations, and so all of this was happening at the same time. And so I decided to um, bring Elio in the mix. But then I said, well, maybe I could bring Sally because they're both based in Oakland. They're both kids of color.
Yeah.
They're both partially Mexican. Elio's full Mexican. Sally's partially Mexican. And I was like, it would be so cool to send them off the grid, you know, because I know that with my own children, when my kids are off the grid and disconnected from phones, I get my kids back.
Yeah.
The kids that they were before technology, I get them back, and there's this peace and essence, and I feel it myself.
Yes.
So I decided to do this, and because I'm also trying to challenge myself as a writer, I'd never written a dual point of view book. I wanted to bring two voices together and challenge myself to make sure that these voices were very distinct and was creating a story in one. So it was an artistic challenge. It was an emotional um, kind of challenge as well, and then it was a challenge from my editor to go there. So it all came together in that way.
It did all come together. It was beautiful. This
Oh,
book,
thank you.
I don't have I usually have the words, to say how the book has impacted me or what I think of it, and I think I don't really have the true words to truly let listeners know how much this book touched me because I am a mom of teenagers. I have two 19-year-olds, I have a 21-year-old, and the digital impact is real. I've seen it. I've seen the positives, I've seen the negatives, seen the hard things. I've seen exactly what the book opens up with, which is two different characters enmeshed in the digital or social world in some way. One is gaming, one is trying to get that social media status, and the followers that everyone is after. And it just hit home. It was just so personal, and it really it just made me think like it is so hard to grow up right now in ways that were not difficult when I was growing up. And so I know that the second readers open this, whether it's one character over the other, they're going to see themselves in this very challenging digital social media space that our whole world is in. And I think are just instantly first going to be at home in that space because they get it. They're probably striving for one or the other. Um, but then the verse, then that expansive verse, the white space on the page, it just invites the reader to really consider what's going on, to consider and see from an outer perspective the maybe I can say addiction to the social media and
Yeah,
and to the
yeah.
gaming and what that might look like from the outside, and then what happens if you are brave enough or forced or whatever to take it away. So this book is just so timely, it's so personal, and you can't help but read it and think about yourself and
Mm.
what those connections might be. On top of the fact that we didn't even talk about, it's a story about teenagers. So there's, some love in there and some fun in there. Like it's got all of the things, but the emotional impact definitely hit hard for me as an adult reader. And I think it's just going to make everybody think, when they get their hands on it. So I'll come up with some better words maybe by the end, but just touched me deeply is what I will say right now, Aida.
Oh, I'm so glad. Never in the history of humanity have children had to contend, or humanity has had to even contend with this amount of information and this kind of mass mm, strategic addiction. I
Yeah.
mean, the companies, there's this wonderful podcast called Left to Their Own Devices that I recommend every parent listen to. And it really outlines how the companies, the social media and the gaming companies have designed these
Yeah.
technologies for addiction, for optimal, like the more time you can spend on there, the more, the better for their bottom, or their bottom line, right? So it really is devastating on many, many levels. But then there is this other aspect, this like connection, this self-discovery, this, activism that happens um, in 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 social media and technology. I'll just say in tech, that we actually, some people can benefit from. And so I think, you know, the book is really trying to kind of not demonize
Right.
our children at all. Like it really is meant to just kind of shine a light and bring self-awareness to themselves. And so I think that's kind of what you tapped into. You're like, oh wait, I'm thinking about this for me,
Yes.
but also for your children. I have a 19-year-old and a 21-year-old too. So
Ah,
they definitely were, who I was observing,
yeah.
and their friends, because it wasn't just them, it's the collective.
Yeah.
And um and it troubles me, but the intent of the book is to through story, through a fun and engaging story, to try and kind of like explore these ideas and see how they can come to their own realizations about what might be hurting them, and ways that they can um, create a balance for themselves.
Which is what the best books do, right? We get to enter the world of the story, but feel it in our own
Mm.
story on the inside. And I think the verse here is a very large factor in that emotional feeling. And you called it a challenge. You were challenging yourself to write from that dual perspective. And
Mhm.
I loved how we had the perspective of one character, the perspective of another, but then sometimes that shared verse. Give me like goosebumps when I would get to those pages. Like, oh, this all comes together. I'd love for you to talk a bit about that. What was that process like of going back and forth to those characters that you previously had written about to now putting side by side and using your verse to tell both single and shared stories?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again was a challenge, but it was a lot of fun. I mean, this is one of the beautiful things about working in this genre, which is a, a hybrid form, right? You have to tell a story, and at the same time you have to do it artfully. And poetry is an expression of what Billy Collins called the history of the human heart, right? And so poetry, because we're allowed into this very intimate interior landscape of these characters through different um, tools of poetry, like imagery and figurative language and music and economy. All of these kind of techniques allow us to get into this really intimate space with these characters. And so I decided to put the character of Elio on the left side of the page. So he's all, when you open the book, you see that always appears on the left side of the page. And whereas Sally, she is justified right. So she's always on the right side of the page. And that was a fun play. And I realize now, actually, because I'm editing an anthology. I'm editing an anthology called "Sing Me a Story" that comes out later this year. But in that, David Bowles does this very same thing. He does in his short story in the anthology. he puts the character on one side and then another character on another side, which is really interesting. And so that's one of the reasons I did that way. And then when they come together is called a contrapuntal poem. You have two different columns of poetry, and they come together in and sometimes in the center. And it's just a style of poetry that you get to play with. And that's the other thing about poetry. It's very playful. And ironically, because of our excess use of technology, our attention spans have diminished. And so when young people are reading nowadays, they're really reading graphic novels or they're reading novels in verse. In fact, a friend was visiting from Rhode Island, and she was here with her son, who's 12 years old. And I said, "Oh, you would really like my book, Ultraviolet." And he's like, "No, no, no. I only read graphic novels and novels in verse." And I was like, "Well, you're in luck because my book is in verse." And he's like, "Okay, okay, okay." So anyway, so yeah, so I think that this um, kind of this hybrid form is really kind of lending itself to accessibility to people who have shortened attention spans. And but at the same time, what I'm intending to do is to craft, like really work on um, on on the poetic tools to bring out a story that is arguably not as easily told through prose because you have all of these details. It's more challenging because you have less real estate on the page, but that's precision of language that you really kind of have to cultivate and look to. And and you mentioned white space. White space really allows the reader to kind of focus, right? Like whenever I'm teaching poetry, we talk about the focus and the attention, and as you're crafting, whenever there's like an intense scene, you can follow it with a short poem with lots of white space to give the reader time to breathe, time to kind of reflect. um, and so there are all these kind of like tricks that you're using as you're writing a verse novel that I think um, that are playful, but at the same time really uh, intended to bring out the art of language.
Hmm. Every time I have a conversation with an author, I once again am reminded of the complexity that goes into crafting those pages. Uh, For me, I am just so in awe over people who write verse novels because just as you said, it's the beauty of the language. It's fewer words to do it. It's conveying such emotion as well as the plot and whatever is happening. But I hadn't even thought of this extra layer now, which is using it as a technique for the reader, right? A little intensity and then less intensity, more white space, more breathing room to really give the reader this almost implicit opportunity to do that kind of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
In a way that is just feels so natural on the page. And now I know why. So I thank you for giving me a little sneak peek into that craft.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it also creates a rhythm in the book as a whole, um, right? Because if
Yes.
you think about music, it's the moment, the pause before the beat drops,
Yeah.
right? That like it creates anticipation, or it creates wonder, or just vibe. So it white space serves that as well.
Yeah. Now in the book, in the back, you do have a note to readers where you talk directly to us about the book and about some of the things on your mind in relation to the book. I'd love if you'd give listeners a little sneak peek into that, which perhaps could lead to you talking a bit about what your hope is for readers in general as they get this book.
Well, in the note, I was really trying to get to readers on a meta level, right? In a way that that after they had enjoyed this story, they could think a little bit deeper. I talked about my kind of surprise at discovering in the research around this book how hurt we have been as a society, as a global society, who have been affected by technology. And so I wanted to tell readers, like, look, this is about finding balance. This can really hurt you, but also there's a lot of magic here. Um, these characters are falling in love, and they deserve a love story. They deserve a happy ending, but they also are learning to kind of discover who they are. And when we can really look at the dangers and the benefits of what it is that we're faced with as a society, then you know that's the invitation for you to find your balance, to find how you're going to use it best, or how you're not going to allow it to use you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I appreciated that. It's not that the book says, off with social media's heads, off with the digital devices. It's not an all or nothing. It's a very intentional reflection around it as it relates to each of us and who we are and what our goals are, all of it. So I really appreciated that as well. Now, as it goes out into the world, I know we've talked about, your hope is to kind of elevate this conversation around digital media and technology, but it's also just a beautiful story to be enjoyed and to be read and to be savored. So, what is your hope for the book as it goes out into the world right now, or your hope for readers who get the book in their hands?
Well, my hope is for us to remember I kind of I said that in my dedication to my children, that my hope is that they remember their source. Part of the book, the biggest part of the book, takes place in nature, um, in reconnecting to ancestry and to traditions, and reconnecting to the human experience of being in relation with to one another. Um, there's indigenous kind of ideals of being one with the land, of belonging to the land. Um, and I really wanted young people to kind of know this about themselves. Like their first and primordial connection is to this earth that we're in.
Mhm.
And we, I think, as we look around, we see parents putting phones and tablets in front of like very, very young babies and children. And I want that not to be our natural way. I want us to remember that our source is with Mother Nature. Our source is protecting our planet, and our source is in relation to one another, and all of that is the cohesion. And I think the cohesion in all of that is what's going to save our world and our spirits in the future.
Mhm. Oh gosh, what beautiful words to end the episode with. This is why everybody needs to read this book, not just a middle grade reader, but everybody needs to read this book. Where is the best place that we can find you online so that we can, dip into your backlist? And you mentioned a book coming so that we can stay up to date with you. Where is the best place to find you?
Well, you can find me on social media or my website. On social media, I'm at my name, Aida underscore writes. And yeah, so I think that's pretty much true across social media. But I'm mostly active on Instagram. And then you can find my website at aidasalazar.com. And yeah, you can always send me an email through there if you want to connect. There's always ways to do it that way.
Wonderful. Well, I will make sure to put links to all of those places in the show notes. And I, of course, will put a link to stream in the show notes as well. And I just want to thank you for spending time with me today and for writing this beautiful book. I really enjoyed our conversation.
I appreciate you so much, Stephanie. It's been such a pleasure. Thank
Thank
you.
you. And listeners, thank you for listening to another episode of KidLit Love, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the KidLit Love podcast. You'll find links to all of the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes and at alitlife.com. You'll also find KidLit Love on Substack. That's where you'll find posts for each episode, monthly KidLit roundups, and an invitation to join my summer book club and go deeper into the world of children's literature. And if you loved this podcast and want more, you might like to listen to my other podcast called Get Literate. It's a podcast that explores all things books and reading, notebooks and writing to build a life you love. One more thing. If you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our bookish community of KidLit Love. Thanks for listening.